Welcome. My name is Uwe Basininiensi from the World Bank. Thank you for joining us today at the Digital Zone. I'm here with Raj Kumar, who is the president and editor-in-chief at Devex. Raj, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Uwe. Great to be here.
We spoke to you last in April after the spring meetings where the World Bank had started its evolution process, and it's been quite the journey, as you can imagine. How are you feeling about where the World Bank is right now in the process?
I think, you've got a new president, and since we last spoke, and the president is known for his aphorisms. I might be stealing from him when I say the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. I think you're going to need a book out of the communications department at the World Bank just detailing all of Ajay Banga's now famous aphorisms, and I think he himself would admit it's too early to say how it's going, but there are some good road marks, right? And in general, the many people I've spoken to at these annual meetings feel like the direction of travel is very clear. The vision is much crisper and clearer than it was before, and there's more of a sense of unity behind that new vision, which includes, of course, climate, the idea of a livable planet.
Yes.
I think there are a number of markers as well along the way, including this idea of sweating the balance sheet and finding additional capital, 150 some billion additional in investment over the next decade, made possible through some financial engineering. But beyond that, it's still quite early, right?
Yeah.
It's still more about finding out how you're going to work with the private sector to generate new levels of investment, how you're going to change the culture at the bank to be much more nimble and agile and faster moving. But the roadmap is clear.
Great. Thank you so much. I think that's really important for audiences to hear in terms of it is early in the process, but there's some clarity, and that I think that's wonderful. Just I want to pick up a little bit about what you said about sort of our new vision and mission specifically. Just the addition of livable planet. I think is a really significant milestone in the process. Could you say any thoughts about that specifically on climate and the having a larger mandate to be able to work on some of these big global challenges like that and the impact that may have?
I think it's an essential ingredient for the future of the bank for a couple of reasons. One, the idea that you're going to bring in private sector investment in very large amounts. That's hard to do if you're still focused exclusively on social and human development. Adding in climate as a dimension, I think, really broadens the aperture because there are many more investable projects under that rubric. Obviously, things like renewable energy, but you can think about the extractive industries that are necessary for the green transition. And many of those kinds of projects also have human development aspects too. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the future of the bank, as well as just the reality of the countries that the bank is supporting and working with. They're all facing a climate crisis, as President Banga said this morning in the plenary. In some ways, there's this false dichotomy, this idea that, well, this is a rich country problem because that's where a lot of the emissions were created. But the climate crisis is everywhere now. And as countries are growing and have the need to address their energy poverty, everybody has to think about how they're generating new energy. So we all have to think of emissions no matter what. The story will be a bit different in low income versus middle versus advanced economies. But I think this was a change in the vision of the World Bank whose time had come. And I think the fact that President Bang has been able to get unanimous support behind it, or largely dramatically changed support behind it at a time that just a couple of years ago this was not so clear you would have ubiquitous support behind it. But it's really changed now, and I think that's a big marker.
That's excellent. So you mentioned partnerships, and and just the role of support for these efforts, and that's something that President Banga has been very clear in terms of we cannot go it alone. What do you think the role is for the international community to help the bank really be effective in moving forward on this roadmap?
Yeah, I think there's a few elements. You saw the picture today of all of the MDB presidents, holding hands on stage. I think collaboration across the international institutions, that's pretty important. At the end of the day, the development plan within a country needs to be supported by all of the various agencies and institutions that are out there globally. If everybody comes with their own plan, it's not going to work. And the best success stories tend to be where governments have a really clear plan, and then the supporting international institutions kind of get in line behind that plan. So I think that's a really big part of it. The other piece is private sector investment. There's huge amounts of capital sitting on the sidelines. We've talked about this forever. Finding ways to truly unlock that, which is much harder to do than maybe this community thought it would be. I think that's going to be really key. And the private sector, where many representatives are here at these annual meetings, the ones I've talked to, there's clearly interest, right? They see the market opportunity. They see the opportunity to have a positive impact in the world as well. But they're facing a lot of challenges still in many of the locations we're talking about. These are not easy places to invest. So I think that's a big perspective for the private sector. And then ultimately, what's going to make individual countries more attractive for investment is governance. And governance requires the right civil society partners. It requires philanthropy often. So I think there's a role for everybody here to get aligned behind not necessarily the World Bank's plan, behind the country's plan, right? That's sort of the key to this. And I think it's well understood here at the bank and under the new leadership.
Yeah. A wonderful way to end the conversation. Definitely, it's about countries. It's about driving the development agenda within countries and what we can do as a global community to support them. So thank you so much, Raj, President and Editor-in-Chief at Devex, for joining us today and having this conversation with us.
It's been a pleasure, Louis. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining.